All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order, 6 o'clock. Kim.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight is the first in a series of budget-related meetings. They are all workshop available, so as we start to present this information, or my microphone cuts out. Hello? Okay, sorry. I was like, man, I guess that budget presentation was over. Tonight we'll be focusing on operations, and we will cover capital projects on Wednesday, September 8th. I would like to thank Nick Hawkins specifically and all the department directors for their help assembling this document. As you can see from your copy, this takes a lot of work. I would like to also note that this is our first year presenting the budget in this new platform. If you'll see on your screens as we go through these documents, you'll have your printed copy in front of you, and we'll have the online version, and we will try to toggle back and forth. And with that, by tradition, we have asked the library and the Parks and Recreation Department to present their budget first. This way they can present their budgets and perhaps not have to stay for the rest of the meeting. They will present both their operating and capital budgets together. So feel free, again, if you have any questions, to please ask them. I would note that both the library and the Parks and Recreation Board have their own separate authority and their own boards and their own budget process. They are here tonight, though, to answer any questions that you may have. So with that, I will start with Lori Manigan with the library.
Oh, you're fine. Hi, there you go. I'm Lori Mangan. I'm the director at the North Kansas City Public Library. Thank you for having me. You can see our budget in your packets. It looks like it starts on page 78. I'm not proposing any changes from last year's budget to our budget. Last year, we did up to a 4% increase for our staff. I've asked for the same up to 4% increase for our staff. That is the only difference from last year's budget to this year's budget. And the capital projects, I can tell you what they are. I would defer to Dwayne on any information about them. I know in there is a tuck pointing and ceiling project. There is an elevator project. There's two parts to that. And there is a gutter project. So, and Anthony, too. I didn't even see that. Either one of them could tell you a lot more about what those projects involve. But I do know that those are in here, and I have a little bit of information about them. So, anyway.
Perfect, thank you. I'm sorry, is that it?
Yep, that's all I got.
All right, are there any questions? Councilmember Kleppner.
Thank you for presenting the budget. And as far as the elevator, we certainly want to keep that operational for different people. If we have time, I'd like to hear more from the technical side of what that entails. But I'm certainly in favor of your budget. Thank you.
Sure. Did you want to?
Anthony. I'm kidding. No, I just calling you every time.
Yeah.
I will step aside for whoever knows about it.
You got it, Anthony.
Actually, I am going to defer to Dwayne Marusars for that. He put that together and is very familiar with the operations of that machine. So,
all right, thank you.
And I have
Stand up here.
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, Council and Mayor. Basically, what we're trying to do is bring the elevator in the library up to ADA standards with a new safety. I have all the detailed technical stuff. And could supply you guys with that at some point, but basically it's to update the elevator operator to make it so it's AD compliant. It's to do with the hoistway entrance. What it is for a closed loop system. It's to add extra safety if a person's in a compromised position, say for instance a wheelchair, the elevator doors will operate according to the way they're supposed to with the new requirements versus the old technology that's there today. that's kind of a shortened version of it.
Thank you. That's all I need.
Councilmember Roberts.
Thank you for the presentation. On page 81, under outside services, there's something that just listed as other services for $34,700, and it's been like that for the last year or so. I'm just curious what that is.
There are a few things that fit under our other services. I'm trying to think. I believe our MoreNet fits under, which is somebody who helps us with web hosting and things like that. We are part of an Amigos library consortium that does some services for us. So that is also something that's under other services. They're kind of companies that provide services that we use on a consistent basis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? All right. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
I would now like to call on Victoria.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. The Parks Fund is supported by a tax levy, which is at its highest authorized use, as well as fees charged for programming, rentals, donations, and sponsorships, and fees from the Kansas City, Missouri for a shared dog park. We anticipate bringing in revenue of $871,300 in the upcoming budget year. We were fortunate this past spring with some of the COVID restrictions being lifted. We were able to get our summer programming, our sports, and our facility rentals back up. The Park Board has budgeted a couple of capital improvement projects through our fund balance in the upcoming year. These would include replacement of the tennis court lights with high-performance LED sports lighting and Mackin Park restroom renovations. The ballpark restrooms will receive a refresh and update, making them ADA compliant, and the WIC restrooms will receive LED lighting, new doors, gutters, and repairs to the overall structure. The other capital improvement project in our budget will encompass the exploration of the River Forest Park project. I did want to mention, we had the Will Park Trail renovation on this year's budget. I have asked to have those funds pushed forward to the upcoming budget year. The timelines aren't matching up, and I'm not able to encumber those funds to a selected vendor yet. Other than that, there weren't any significant changes to our line items on the revenue or expenditure side, only slight adjustments. Any questions?
Councilmember Smith.
Okay, a couple things. The first is, so $46,000 on the tennis court lights. Is there significant demand in the evening for the tennis courts?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good then. Second question, this mentions the WIC restrooms.
Those are the restrooms right across from the center by the festival shelter.
Okay, perfect. And then this is a general, just kind of a question for staff. This whole transfer system where one fund pays another, and then back and around, is there anything we can do to clean that up? Because it's really confusing in a kind of a circular way.
We can definitely look at options for that. What this really helps out is we like to have the actual expenditures come out of the operating fund. So it works best if parks projects are paid out of the park fund, even if that money comes from the gaming fund. Similar for, water, wastewater, those funds. It really helps us out from a capitalization standpoint. But that we've had discussions on that and how we can make that process easier without sacrificing anything on the audit side. So
Gotcha.
we can
Okay.
definitely look at options there.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Just a side note on that, Jesse, I asked about that about 2 or 3 years ago when Shirley was still here, and I guess it's some kind of accounting issue as far as one fund paying the other or what have you, but if there's a way to clean that up to make it easier to understand, that's certainly great. So, thanks.
Any further questions? Councilmember Plumlee.
I just had one. There's a custodial fee budgeted for $7,800. It looks like we've not spent anything in the past few years. I just was going to clarify what that was.
Correct. We have switched staff around a little bit, so we have just now employed hygienes again to clean the building. Before we had allocated a staff person for that, but we've removed them and put them back into the park maintenance side.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
So I kind of mentioned this before. This is the first year with our new budget online platform. We do anticipate, and you can visually see the changes between these two documents, last year's budget and this year's budget. We do anticipate this document growing and changing as we learn more about the product and hear feedback from both council and the community of how they would like the numbers to be able to be presented. Again, all within what we can do from an accounting position as well as GFOA best standards. You guys have heard us talk about this before. That was one of the reasons why we wanted to shift the budget document to this online platform. GFOA is kind of the best practices governing body of how budgets are presented to the public, as well as almost standardizing them across the board. That way, as people review budgets from community to community, it's not this shock of they look and feel completely different documents from one to another. So we do anticipate this document changing year after year as we, again, kind of learn what it can do. It is learning from us as well. We are providing content and feedback back to the website developer on our kind of some of the challenges or comments that we are hearing. So one of the quick things I want to kind of go over a little bit about budget philosophy and then get into the rest of the presentation. The budget is a point-in-time document, meaning that eventually we have to stop looking at the numbers and then begin working on the proposed numbers. So as the city council knows, we make budget amendments continuously. The budget's really meant to be a flowing document. It's not meant to be this document you stick on the shelf. It's meant to live and breathe and serve the community. So it's often changed and manipulated throughout the year. So some of the numbers that are in our proposed budget right now have actually changed as the city council has made a couple of budget amendments within the last several meetings. So if you have questions or concerns as we kind of go through the budget document, understand some of those numbers have shifted specifically in our capital, which we'll get into in a future meeting. So the proposed budget is kind of our best guess. It is staff's best guess to meet the city council's priorities, project our future needs, and estimate the income that we will have to work with to meet the community demands of the coming year. Really, the proposed budget, once it is handed to the governing body, it becomes your budget. So it is no longer staff's budget, it is the governing body's budget. And it is yours to program as you see fit. With that being said, we would like to kind of go over a few things in the proposed budget, and then we would like to hear some feedback and answer your questions of how you would like this document to be presented to you when it comes forward for formal adoption. The fiscal 2022, and I feel like we've said this the last at least year to year and a half, it's an interesting document in the lens of our COVID response. The estimates that we have worked with have really changed. The numbers are really moving around from month to month. And then with the injection of federal stimulus dollars, we really are kind of in this area to project our current funds of what we'll be able to work with in a very interesting, and we don't have a parallel or historical way to go back in time and see a similar story that we can use to quantify our numbers. So many industries continue to struggle. Some are recovering boldly, but as the variants kind of tick back up again, we are taking a very conservative approach because we really don't know what the future is holding for us, and we want to be able to make sure that we are able to maintain the services that the community has come to enjoy, and not have to get into a position where we are forcing the governing body to make some pretty difficult decisions. So the proposed total budget expenses for all funds, less transfers, is a little bit over $62 million. And we are projecting a deficit. Again, one of the things that you use a reserve fund is for rainy days, and we are well within those rainy days at this point. We are projecting that revenues will only come in at 86.4%. Again, so we are dipping into our reserves. Some of the questions are, should we cut services? And there really isn't a way to cut the services without cutting people. The city's budget is really heavily for people. The city government, we are service-based oriented. We are a service-based organization. What we do is we provide services to the community, and there's really only one way to do that, and it's through people power. So, again, kind of this is our best guess off of, and again, I kind of talked before about how our strategic planning session and our budgeting process was a little bit backwards, but we really did try to listen to what the governing body had talked about at the dais and try to meet your programming needs that you would like to see in the proposed budget. We do feel, at least at the staffing side, that we would like to remain as conservative as possible, again, because we just don't know financially where we are going to go with this global pandemic, and we want to make sure we're not in a position to come back with some bad decisions for you to have to make. So for tonight, Nick Hawkins will provide an overview of the revenue assumptions and the fund balances. After that, we will have the department directors provide an overview of their individual departments, and then we will get into special funds over that. Again, feel free to ask questions, especially if you have clarification. We recognize that some of you are new to this process, and it can be a little bit daunting when we land I believe bludgeoning weapon was one of the words, onto your plate, and then expect you to digest it and give feedback on it. So with that, Nick, I hand it over to you.
Well, good evening, Mayor, members of the governing body. As Kim said, I'm going to go over some revenue assumptions, talk about fund balance, and give a broad overview of personnel, which again is one of our largest expenses. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to be working, if you're reading from the PDF version, I'm on page 99. And if you're following along with the online version, I'm under fund summaries, and then this first fund summary. So looking at our revenues by source, I'm going to start with sales tax. And out of our total budget, it is about 15% of our total revenue. Kim mentioned a lot of the fluctuation with revenue assumptions for a lot of cities and economic uncertainty with COVID. We're in a slightly different position than we were last year when we were talking about this. And we had a few months of data that showed the early on effects of COVID. This year, we're probably not going to know any effect from the Delta variant until October and November because sales tax lags about a month and a half behind actuals. But for sales tax, it has been coming in really strong this year. Right now, we're about 20% over what we collected at the same time last year. Our budget number, we're budgeting 15% above what we had in the fiscal year 2021 budget, and if things hold, that will be a very conservative number. So there's been a thread going on with a lot of the cities across Missouri right now, and we're in a very similar situation as a lot of cities are. We're seeing a lot of growth. We don't know how much it's actually going to continue. We're in a fortunate position where I think we can be pretty conservative with our revenue estimates, and that's what I think we're doing with sales tax this year. Next, I'm going to talk about property tax. That is 9% of our overall budget. It's primarily in 3 different funds: our general fund, library fund, parks and recreation. There's also some that goes to a police and fire pension program as well. Right now, we have that budgeted flat compared to fiscal year 2021. We will not know the full impact of property tax until later on in September. Previously, we would get these numbers in August, but this year, with changes to Clay County being a charter county now, we won't get that until September. But we'll have a very quick turnaround time when we do get those numbers. We get them from the county. We then submit that to the state auditor's office. They go through and give us forms that say what our maximum tax levy can be, and then we go and set that tax hearing. We have to do that 7 days in advance, and our goal for this year is to get that for the September 21st meeting, but that's also out of our hands. What we do know, based on what the county has provided us, is that assessments are up significantly. And again, I've talked to a couple other Clay County cities, and they're noticing the same thing as well. Unfortunately, due to the Hancock Amendment, we won't see much of that growth. We're tied to a CPI increase, which is 1.4% for this year. So if I had to put a budget figure out there right now, I'd say it's going to be about 1.4%. but that can fluctuate based on actual collections. Next, I'm going to talk about this other revenue, and other revenue is primarily our gaming. So in the general fund, that includes rent from Harrah's. That is based on the calendar year. This year, we budgeted the minimum, which is $2 million. We actually collected $2.5 million, and that's what we budgeted for fiscal year 2022. Gaming has overall trended back to about where it was in prior years, but it's overall on a slight decline. So we're fairly conservative with that projection, and we've already beaten projections for this year, but next year we're anticipating it's going to be a similar to what we've collected this year. Charges for services, which actually of overall revenue is our highest revenue source. That is primarily our water and wastewater utility fees. So as we talked about earlier this month, that includes a 20% increase for water and a 25% increase for wastewater. Most other sources of revenue remain largely flat. Franchise taxes, which includes our electric and gas utility franchise fees, those have been trending flat for the last couple of years. Did dip a little bit last year, and that's what we're projecting again this year, about $1.8 million for electricity and $370,000 for our gas utility. Franchise taxes also includes our hotel motel taxes, which Kim will talk about a little bit in the Convention and Tourism Fund. That is one that's probably seen the biggest impact from COVID. So revenues are down significantly. 2 years ago, we collected about $550,000 in that fund. This year, we're projecting about $300,000. Couple factors, COVID being the primary one. We've also had 2 new hotels open, but all of that revenue shifts to the One North TIF fund, so we're not realizing any of that benefit. From a fund balance perspective, as Kim noted, we are fairly conservative with how we budget both revenues and expenses. On the expense side, we project that we're going to be fully staffed for the entire year and utilize, every dollar amount that we have allocated. It rarely happens that way, but we have to budget for and be prepared for that to happen. If you'll look, it's this second to last column here, revenue over under expenditures. Right now, again, being conservative, we're budgeting a deficit in nearly every fund. I don't think we're going to hit that. I think, the general fund this year, we budgeted a $2.7 million deficit. We're going to end up with a surplus this year. Again, we were so conservative with our revenue estimates due to COVID, and we're keeping that line this year just to be prepared for anything. Our special revenue funds, which includes parks, library, gaming, those can only be used for specific purposes. Again, from a fund balance goal perspective, we like to keep those at 25% of operating revenues, and we believe that we'll hit all of those targets in this upcoming budget. Enterprise funds, which are funds that operate like businesses, so expected to be self-sufficient based off of the user fees that they generate. Those are in our water and wastewater pollution control funds. We are trying to get away from gaming fund subsidies for those, as we've talked about, and we are trying to build back the fund balance in those to adequate 25% reserves. The other two, which I'll talk about a little bit later tonight, the community center and communications, our KC Fiber Fund. Those are also heavily dependent on gaming fund subsidies outside of our third-party agreements that we have in there. So I'm going to switch over now to personnel and just hit 2 real high-level things on there. One, wage assumptions for this budget are 3% in the aggregate for non-represented employees. We have 2 unions in fire and police. Fire their contract ends this year, so they are currently negotiating that. We have included an increase for that group, and police is averaging 4.2% increase for their represented employees. The other area that I wanted to touch base on is our healthcare. So right now, we're only budgeting a slight decrease from our current budget. We anticipate, and we've already gotten the contracts ready for next year, we're going to see significant savings in those areas. But again, being conservative in how we budget, if there are any plan changes, if someone switches from a single person to a family plan, those can have some pretty big budget impacts. So we're just anticipating that, if it comes to that scenario, we're prepared from a budget standpoint.
Thank you. I had a question on the health insurance, Nick. Since we were budgeting a decrease, but I see in a lot of the line items that they're actually going up. Is that what you're saying, your conservative budget? And then you're expecting to come in under that?
Yes, and that can fluctuate from year to year based on the individual plans that employees are in. So again, someone might retire and they were on the single plan, then you hire someone who's on the family plan. We account for that, and that's where you see a lot of those increases happening.
Thanks.
All right, well, that is my kind of high-level budget overview. Our next step is to go into the department budgets, which begin on page 10 if you're in the PDF version. And the first one that we'll start with is administration, which Kim will cover.
So I'll take the first two, which are administration and municipal court. Administration is the elected officials, city administration, city clerk, human resources, finance, IT, legal, and economic development. So, and I am on page 10 of your printed document. So kind of just a quick overview. Not much changes within this particular. We did up the training budget for the elected officials. We have a lot of new elected officials who are looking to increase their knowledge on governance, and we are accounting for that so that you can take those trainings that you would like to see and bring all of that great knowledge back to us. We are also proposing a compensation study that is going to be in fiscal 2022. It has been a couple of years since we have done that particular item. Specifically, now that particular model is pretty volatile, anybody who is trying to hire anybody right now, it is a quickly changing market. So we would like to kind of get a better understanding to make sure we are competitive and are able to hire the talent that we need here to provide the services that the City Council would like to see. Another thing that I'd just like to notate is we also have an increase in the collector's expense. The city does contract with Clay County for collection of property taxes, and with the new agreement, there is an increase in that particular service. It's still quite below what we would do if we had to do that service ourselves. We would have to hire pretty good staff, a new accounting system. So even though it is an increase for service, it is still much cheaper than if we tried to do that ourselves. I'm also proposing a new position, which would be the deputy city clerk. This new position would be to support our city clerk and as well as our human resources department. As we grow and develop and our needs change, we've had several new boards come on, and those boards need some additional clerical support, as well as really human resources is a changing time in and of itself. We've had quite a few retirements. Those retirements take quite a bit of work to process, as well as onboarding many new employees. So this would help, that particular position will help with those efforts as well. One item that has kind of, I'll be honest, has come to my attention now that I have a little bit different perspective being in the interim role, and that is something I would like to ask the City Council if I could bring back to you, which would be some additional funding to help support the City Councilor. The City Councilor has quite a bit that we put on our plate, and more specifically, a lot more on our plate recently with several of the policy changes that we are doing currently. So if the City Council would be amenable, I would like to bring forward a change to the document you see in front of you to add $20,000 to allow the City Councilor to have some on-demand legal support. for documents, specifically documents that we are asking him to kind of juggle during, in addition to his day-to-day. So if the city council could kind of give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, a yes, no.
I think I heard two different things, so I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. Is the $20,000 a pay increase for the individual or used for outside?
This would be outside legal
Okay, I
counsel.
want to make sure I understood that right.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I may not have explained that very well. But it wouldn't be really curtailed to one specific organization. As you guys know, there are several different agencies that really specialize in different styles of municipal governance. So sometimes it could be an HR question, sometimes it could be a contract for services question. We would really leave that up to the city councilor's discretion of what kind of assistance he would need.
Put that on. 20,000 seems relatively low.
So that,
Are you anticipating just a little bit of services required, or?
so I actually got that number from the city councilor because I asked, I said, how much support do you think that you need and what number do you need me to ask? He's actually out of town right now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would call on him for that particular question.
Obviously.
But this is the number that he gave, and should this amount not be sufficient,
We will have to change it.
I kind of go back to the budget is a fluid document. We'd
Yeah.
probably come forward and ask permission to provide additional support, should that line item go a little thin on
I
us.
just want to point out that to the rest of the council and to the people, that sounds like a low figure, and we may very well have to increase that.
Sorry, it would be in addition to what we already budget for that, right? Don't we already budget for outside counsel?
Correct.
Yeah. So there is more than 20,000.
Well, yeah.
So if there are no more questions about the administration budget, I'll pivot on over to the municipal court budget. So that is on page 17. Yes?
So I did have one question, and I had hoped not to ask this at the very top of the meeting, but when was the last time we did any sort of compensation study on elected officials? Not necessarily asking to raise our pay, but finding what other municipalities of similar size and scope are paying. I'm not even sure when the last time the pay was increased.
The city clerk is notifying me a couple of years ago.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is that a desire that you would like us at the staff level to look at?
Yeah, I'd appreciate it, just to see how we compare.
We're taking notes along the way, just in case you guys have any wonderment. So, is that all the questions for administration? I'm going to switch on over to municipal court, again, page 17. This particular line item supports the municipal court staff, judge, and prosecutor. And really, there are no changes to this particular budget aside from payroll. We have successfully made the transition over to the Show Me Court system, which was something that we did a couple of years ago to come into compliance with several of the state and court mandates. And right now, we are running those dual systems, and we do anticipate running those dual systems for at least 10 to 15 years. And again, that is to come into compliance with a lot of the state legislation. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chief Hargis.
Good evening, Mayor and Councils. Our budget remains slightly changed from last year's. We had some increases in cost and a couple of issues with a software company charging us for a changeover after a purchase. One of the things I wanted to point out to you, though, on our budget was under professional services, that $125,000, the majority of that is our prepayment for our GEMT funding, which we get back. And this year we netted over right around $180,000 from that program. So when you're looking at that line item, it's actually kind of a wash back with the revenue on that. And other than that, our mission stayed the same, so our budget's staying relatively the same. Any questions?
So the one line item that jumps off at me is overtime, and I'm curious if, because it's $150,000 budgeted this year. It's been as high in prior years as 132. Would it actually be a cost saving to allocate additional employees so that the ones that are in didn't have to run overtime?
That is a thought. However, most of that overtime goes to the fact that we're unable to stay fully staffed. Matter of fact, we lost an employee today.
Oh, wow.
And that large issue a few years ago with 132,000, we went for about 4 months with 6 people short on staffing.
Wow.
So it would be nice we could staff up, but we have to be able to find that staff and keep them on board.
Okay, so that you have enough allocation of employees, it's just the hiring issue?
It's a hiring issue, and then it's always that unanticipated, we have somebody that has a knee injury and they're off for 3 months, and we're having to fill those spots, and we operate with that minimum manning, so we have to have that number of people there. So it's, some years we do really good, and some years we'll have 3 or 4 guys that get hurt, whether on the job or off the job, and it's the nature of the game with our business.
Sure, and certainly it's a moving target, but if you have thoughts on how we could bring that overtime number down and make it easier for you to manage, have more employees, we're all ears if you have thoughts on it down the road.
Find me some great employees that want to stay and come to work every day.
All right.
So it's really a moving target because there may be there's times where we go for a month and we don't have any overtime at all, and then we have some people quarantined now with COVID, so we have 4 people off a shift out of 15 people, so we're having to cover those. And when you're looking at covering that many people, it's an overtime cost.
Understood.
Councilmember Plumpy.
Chief Hargis, I just had one question. The equipment under public safety jumped from 32 to 99,000. Is that where the PCR tests got put in, or where's that located?
No, that's our equipment we're buying this year. We're after replace our 4 gas detectors and some other things like that. So it's just, that fluctuates every year too as to what we need to replace in equipment. That's just an equipment cost replacement. Last year's was pretty good. This year's, we need to buy some more stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Again, just a quick comment, we will be getting into some capital purchases, so you do see them reflected on here. So we will be going over those line item capital purchases at the Wednesday one.
All right. Is that it for you?
Unless
Any
you
further
guys have any
questions?
other questions.
Seeing none, it looks like we'll go next door to you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Major Mark Smith and Major Jim Bagley here, part of the command staff. And obviously with a lot of departments, this does not come together by one person. It's a team effort, and they have a significant part in that. So in our budget this year, you see a little bit of an increase in our personnel chart. To Councilmember Saper's suggestion, we have added funding for an additional full-time animal control officer. And with that, also potentially promoting our current animal control officer to a more supervisory level. So you'll see some increased expense there. We have a pretty significant increase in our maintenance agreements this year. Some of our equipment, specifically our camera system in the cars and our body cams, they're aging to try to keep the level of warranty coverage that we have on them now. We're in the 5th year of those systems, so those go up annually. As those systems age, each year it gets more expensive and more expensive to continue to warranty them. This, we anticipate, probably being the last year with this current system, as in our projection for next fiscal year, we'll be looking to replace the in-car and the body cameras with a new system. With new systems comes automatic warranties, so we don't have that initial year-to-year expense. Included in that is also adding a crime mapping software platform. Currently, we use a system called City Protect. That is going to be, that's a free system now. It's going to start to have to pay for it if we want to keep it. So we're looking at a couple different options, and that is something that we link to our website so the public can see what's going on in their neighborhood. Some basic information about a stealing was here, or a car theft was here, just stuff like that. Systems there is one of the things that was brought up at the community forum last year, and it's been a struggle with us. With a free system, you kind of get what you pay for. So we're trying to work with a couple of vendors and try to get the kinks worked out. So that's where you see some significant increases there. Detention is also going to be an increase for us this year. As you see, Clay County is raising the cost to house our municipal prisoners this year. They haven't done so since inception, I don't think. So it's been quite a while, and so it's probably due. They're still well below market if there is a market for this. So if we were to outside house somewhere else, there are options. They are quite a distance away from the metro area, so transportation comes in play with all that. So that those increases are in there, and ammo. Ammo's our other big increase this year. If you follow the news, guns and ammo are flying off shelves. They've been doing so for the last year and a half. Supply chain issues affects this as well. And our transition to the 9mm from the 40 depleted our ammo supply. It takes us now 5,000 rounds per cadet through the academy. That's gone up significantly over the years. So as you remember, we hired 6 new police officers this year, put them through the academy. So it depleted our ammo. And so we're down to, we got our delivery today, our final delivery today of the stuff we ordered October 2nd last year. So that's how long it's taken us.
So, question on the rounds. So you use 5,000 to send them to academy. How many do you guys use on your recurring training?
So I'll call on Major Bagley. He's kind of the prime leader and our ammo expert.
There we go. Thank you.
Good evening. So our post-training, just to train our officers, we shoot just under 15,000 rounds a year. We shoot 4 times a year. Our first qualification's pistol, so we do fire almost 5,000 rounds, just certifying the police officers and our reserves. The academy, as the chief is saying, we had to give the academy 25,000 rounds. We would have had to give them 30, but one of our recruits dropped out. We usually keep about 30,000 rounds in storage. So when we place our order, it usually does take about 5 to 6 months to get our ammunition. So at the beginning of the year, in January and February, when we start our qualifications again, we have ammo to use. Currently, I have 7,000 rounds in the armory, and we still have 2 qualifications, which is going to deplete 2,500 rounds the next 2 times. So that's 5,000 rounds we're going to shoot up there. Yes, sir.
Just a question about purchasing. Do you have to purchase directly from a manufacturer, or is there some sort of statewide or local consortium that you use?
We purchase through Gulf States distributors. We do not purchase directly by a manufacturer, and we use the state bid. In May, when we were developing the budget, one of the biggest reasons the budget was so high is that 9mm ammunition for 1,000 rounds was $750 a case, and we pay through state bid $163 a case. So that was the
So you are
huge
able to
jump.
use a
Yes.
consortium of purchasing or through the state?
And at the time, the Missouri contract had expired when we were developing this budget. I do have the new contract in hand, and 9mm has only gone up 10 cents a case, so we'll still be spending $163.95 a case. So we'll be in better shape than we had anticipated.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you for that explanation. I had the same question. Are these numbers, the 5,000 and the 15,000, I think you said annually, are those requirements for continued, like ongoing education?
Yes. That's,
okay.
Yeah, our post-education.
Okay. I didn't know if there was a way in a time of crazy high prices to cut those down at all so that we're not having to outlay, we're not having to have our armory run dry. Is there any way that could be cut down, or is that just a requirement we have to go with?
I can answer that.
Yep.
We have done that. We've been conservative as we saw this kind of coming along.
Sure.
The fact is that we do have to qualify a minimum of twice a year. So it's a practice qualification, a legit qualification, and a function drill, making sure that we know how to clear the guns and stuff like that. So that has to be done twice a year.
Okay.
And then we also add in one qualification each time we're qualifying one of our off weapons, the shotgun or the rifle or anything like that. So where we also burn ammo is our tactical team. So that's where we've been conservative this year with trying to use less during this time of crisis. And like the Major said, a lot of these numbers are factored in on what could be. If we had to pay that 400% increase, we don't think we're going to have to. So we really feel like the number's in there, but we're not going to spend it just because it's there. We're going to stay with what we're comfortable with our traditional reserve ammo is.
So the 35K is kind of a worst case?
Correct.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yep.
Councilmember Clevenger.
A couple of things. Thanks for the presentation. You answered my question about the body cameras and the camera system. Is what the break point is when the warranty upgrade is worth replacing it, and it looks like you're going to do that next year. Just a question for maybe like future years, not in this year, but with the new apartments that are coming online, do you anticipate in the future, I know you added an animal control person this year, do you anticipate adding any patrol officers in the next year or two?
I mean, those are conversations that I think we have to have. We have to look at what the influx in new population is going to do to our department, and all while maintaining the level of service that our citizens have come to expect. So, yeah, I do believe that those conversations will probably be happening in the next year or so, but we'll wait and see how that flushes out, too.
Any further questions? Councilmember Toll.
I know everybody's having trouble retaining employees, but do you know how we compare to surrounding areas as far as pay and benefits?
Roughly. I mean, the last compensation study kind of kept us, the city's philosophy has always been, we don't necessarily want to be the highest paid, but we don't want to be the lowest paid either, so we're comfortable being in the middle. But like Kim said, a lot of departments are starting to step up those pay matrices. Our neighbors to the west, Riverside, just had a pretty significant increase for their officers.
Yeah.
They are now top paid department, I think, in the metro. Johnson County Sheriff's Department held that title for a little while, but they've now been surpassed, and it's a chase your tail kind of a thing. As soon as someone increases, everyone else is looking to bump themselves back up. One of the things that I would be definitely interested in exploring, I know it's going to be a significant sticker shock, is what would it take to make a difference? What would it take to have people look at us and say, that's the department I want to go work for? But it would be significant.
My next question is, you have your own police academy, correct? You're not going through, no? Can you
No,
explain that
no,
to me?
ma'am.
Because somebody had brought that up. So I didn't know if we were footing the bill for a police academy, could we have a minimum service number of years?
So we do.
You do, okay.
Yeah, when we put someone through the police academy, we ask them to hire a police training agreement. And so it says that they'll work for us for 3 years, or they'll pay us back the cost of the academy at a prorated basis. So we just unfortunately had one of our recruits, other than the one that quit during the academy, we had one that quit 3 weeks out of the academy. And she repaid us the entire amount of the academy, which right now is $5,300 per cadet. And that's Kansas City's regional academy. That's who when we hire people, we send them through Kansas City's regional police academy. We will hire people that have already had their certification through another academy.
Yeah.
But if we hire them without one, we send them through Kansas City's academy.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
Getting creative. I know that you guys are down in numbers. Are you always down, have you ever been full, like where you're supposed to be? Because I'm thinking, if you haven't been, can you take the money that one person that has never been hired in the last year, 2 years, however long, and roll that into salaries of people who are working for you?
So the answer to your first question is, I can recall in 24 years being full one time. And it was a very short period of time. Now, our organization is set up for a certain number of people and able to function how we want to function as an organization. It takes those people to answer the calls for service, answer the 911 calls, answer the report calls. It takes those people to investigate the calls. It takes them to be the community policing officers. It takes them to be the traffic officers. It takes them to be these are all things that are important to our organization. And we supplement our patrol staff with our specialized units when we're down people. So I wouldn't want to, pie in the sky, unicorn sitting somewhere. I would like to have I would like to keep that number and shoot for that number. We got very close with these 6 cadets that went through. Obviously, we lost 2 of them already. And then in the interim, we'd lost 2 more. So we're back down chasing our tail again. So I understand your point, but I wouldn't want to necessarily lose that number in order to raise salaries.
Can we lower the compensation study? It sounded like he already had part of it there. You got to pay him $5,000 of that.
No, and then just quickly from a budgetary standpoint, we have to, as Chief had said, so there's a certain amount of people that are authorized force. From a budget perspective, I have to assume that I have every single human, every single day at full maximum salary. And the reason being is if I don't, again, this is an authorizing document, I don't have the money to pay them unless it's in this document, if that makes sense.
All right, Councilmember Graves.
Chief Freeman, I appreciate you, and you're probably sick of me talking about this with you, but parking is one of the main complaints I get on a regular basis, and I see in here we're budgeted for 0.5 parking control officers, and I understand that the parking control officer is transitioning to become a police officer, so we have an opening.
We hope so.
Hopefully, knock on wood. And so would it make sense from like you and I have spoken privately about the fact that the parking patrol officer is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's like a Monday through Friday kind of 9 to 5 position, and they spend most of the time in the downtown portion of North Kansas City, like along Armour and Swift, kind of generally speaking. Would it make sense to add another parking officer to quell the complaints that we get from residents about people parking illegally in residential areas during football games, etc.? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, my opinion is I don't believe adding another parking control person, albeit a part-time or full-time, is necessary to fix the problems that are being brought to your guys' attention. What I would like to see is that if someone has a parking complaint, they bring it to our attention, and we will go address it. We don't have to have a parking control officer on duty to address a parking complaint and write a parking ticket. I've written several of them in my career. So that's what I would encourage is if there's a complaint, a specific complaint in time, don't wait for days to complain to your council person. Call us right then and there, and we'll come out and we'll address it.
And so let's be crystal clear for people playing along at home. If you see someone parked illegally during a football game, should they post it on Facebook? Or what would you suggest that they actually do? What phone number should they call?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to address that. And the phone number is not 911.
Okay.
It is the non-emergency number, 816-274-6010.
Thank you.
And that'll ring right into dispatch. They can let the dispatcher know where the parking complaint is at, and they'll dispatch somebody when available to address it.
So if they put it on Facebook, you guys are not actively monitoring Facebook while you're on patrol?
We are not.
Okay, thank you.
We might have to address that later. Yeah, they should also start a poll at the same time, just for good measure. Any further questions? Councilmember Toll.
Just have one more. I'm still stuck on the only fully staffed once in 24 years, because I feel like the money is sitting there and it's not getting used. If we could increase the pay for the people that are there, what happens to the money that's not used for staffing?
That money is cleared out at the end of the year and returned back to the general fund for reprogramming.
Okay, you're probably going to tell me this isn't possible, but what if we used one person's money? I don't know how understaffed you usually are, but could we make an amendment for more money if you were to be able to get staffed fully? Like, could we use the money for the people that are actually hired? how many individuals would you say?
Could-
What would be fully staffed?
Fully staffed, authorized force is 40, really 40 people. We're authorized for 41. We added one position a couple years ago. The goal at that point, going back in time, was an overstaffing model, where like it takes us 40 people by our organizational chart to fill every position that we have and operate functionally at full capacity. If we asked the city council at the time to authorize an additional position, which raises us to that 41 in a overstaffing type of a role, knowing that we'll never get there.
Yeah.
So we always have that loop and that transition going on. But 40 is the number for us to fill our positions as our organizational chart shows it.
And what
Did
would
that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
And what would be the average number of people you have employed at once? I know it fluctuates.
Yeah, I would say it's been a rough couple of years. We generally, through attrition or other means, lose 3 to 4 people annually. So by the time we ramp up, hire, academy, field training, if we're fortunate enough to maybe find somebody that's already certified, that obviously shortens that time. It takes a year for us to put someone on the streets as a working police officer. So that's the chasing the tail thing. We're always chasing that. But I would say an average, normal, like throughout my career type of a thing, we were probably 37 to 38 people most of the time, not including these last two and a half years.
Okay.
Kind of following up on some of those questions, what do you feel would be the best use of funds to recruit and retain employees? Because I know we talk salary, I mean, that's always kind of the low-hanging, throw out salary. I mean, do you see any other productive use in funds for that?
I mean, I have lots of ideas, whether or not that they would stick and work. Obviously, I could write a book and make a lot of money if that was the case, because we're not immune to this. I mean, this is what's going on across the country. Everybody's struggling to hire public servants, not just police, fire, EMS. You know, it's just people don't want to work in city governments, municipal governments any longer for some reason. I would like to say pay would make a big difference. Like if you throw out there like a big dollar amount, comparing who are we really competing against. We always compare ourselves to other police departments. Well, so-and-so's paying this and so-and-so's paying that, but who are we really competing against right now for people? And some of the things that I've thought about is trades. I feel like we're competing against trades for people that would want to do a job like ours. I think those trades are paying significantly higher than what we're paying right now. So people don't look at police, fire, EMS. Obviously, I think some of the negative media attention law enforcement's had over the last few years hasn't helped. People want to seek out this as a career. You know, the old school in me, because I love doing this job, wouldn't want it to be pay. I want someone to do it that wants to do it. But sometimes those dollars matter. And once you get them in, when they get a few years on, they start looking at what's next, what's ahead, promotions, retirement. Retirement matters. When you start looking and you get a 10-year officer and they start actually paying attention to those things. Well, so-and-so's getting this in their retirement benefit, and so-and-so's getting this in their retirement benefit. So I'm going to go where that fruit's at then at that point. So it's a total package. It really is. There's a lot of dancing right there, so I don't know that I answered the question.
No, that's, you know, I think you set us up for another work session there. So thank you. All right, any further questions for the police department? All right, looks like we're moving to Anthony for like the next 5 here.
Yes, yeah. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm going to give a brief overview of the Public Works operating budget. With me tonight, I have Dwayne Marusars. He's the Superintendent of the Buildings and Grounds and Transportation Division. John Sponsler. He's the Superintendent of the Water and Wastewater Division. And Chris Cooper, Capital Project Manager and Engineering Technician for Public Works. I'm not sure how often these guys appear in this setting, so I just want to kind of point out, you know, these are the guys making things work behind the scenes. Them and their teams, they get things done. Every time we get a compliment in Public Works, they're the ones that deserve the credit. So I'm going to try to speak intelligently tonight about their budgets, and they will fill in any gaps of information that I don't have. So diving into this, Mayor, as you said, Public Works is divided into 5 different budgets. First one is administration. It's probably the smallest one. Actually, didn't even plan to start with that one, but that's just basically for employees, office staff for administration, training, kind of the smallest one. Getting into the bigger ones, the big four, starting on page 42, we're looking at buildings and grounds. Buildings and grounds is responsible for maintenance of city-owned structures, buildings, gets involved with Parks and Rec, maintaining, helping mow, and just different grounds in the city. Some of the larger things in there, HVAC repairs, elevators, you kind of see those larger ticket items in some of the larger buildings in the city. Something that's kind of different this year is prior years in transportation, we had a public or downtown maintenance line item. That item has gone away, and it's become two line items in buildings and grounds. One is public space maintenance, and the other one is parking lot maintenance. So that $25,000 has been divided into two $15,000 line items. And then another thing that's in buildings and grounds is holiday decorations. So this year we're asking for $5,500 increase in that line. Some of the decorations are getting kind of old, worn out. We'd like to, I think over the last 3 years, we've been trying to replace them, and this would kind of finish that out to complete the kind of newer holiday decorations. Transportation is the next one. That's on page 48. This is a pretty big budget. In this one, you're going to find streetlights. City-owned streetlights include some of the decorative ones on Swift and Armour. A lot of the other ones, the Cobra head style is what we call them. Those are leased through Evergy, sorry. And that's kind of for the electricity and the maintenance and the lights themselves. We also have 6 leased traffic signals, kind of the same thing that covers the maintenance, electricity, different things that can go wrong with those items. That's a very specialized field. You have to be kind of an electrician and also a specially permitted electrician to mess with traffic control. So it's something that we have on those signals.
One second,
go ahead.
Councilmember.
Yeah, I had a quick question on the street lights, because that's a number that just jumps right off the page.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what it should or shouldn't cost, but is it cost effective to lease versus own traffic lights? Street lights?
It is.
Okay.
Most cities our size do that. You're hard to find a city. Kansas City, I think, owns theirs, but that's kind of a rarity. One thing that's kind of advantageous sometimes is LED conversion, which we have already had done through Evergy, through our street lights. So, as long as that's already accomplished and they're maintaining it to the level of standard we would like, it's a good way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Saber.
Are there other vendors who would do this size?
Because they supply the power to the light, it's kind of difficult to separate that out. But
Okay, that's
yeah,
what I'm asking.
yeah.
I didn't know if that was possible.
No, it's kind of been done that way for a very long time because of that reason.
Councilmember Roberts.
On the salaries, you have a $160,000 increase from 2021. I'm just curious about that.
Sure, I'm actually, I'll have to go over to Nick for that. Some of the upper line items on that page are kind of covered from different areas.
So this area is often kind of intermixed with the buildings and grounds, and last year, I believe we added a foreman position. It's taken a little bit of time for that to stick to the right spot. So, our projection for this year is a little bit lower. The budget itself is from the FY21 budget to the 22 proposed budget is largely in line, but we're seeing a transition basically between those groups. So I would anticipate that next year we'll see it come closer to that 382 number.
Speaking quickly about that particular line item, though, for specifically Public Works, Fire, and Police, when we do that compensation study, we are fully anticipating that we are out of market rate for at least some of those positions. Right now, as you guys know, we are in a white-hot building market. So if you have skills in that craft. We are losing some of our team members to the housing market or to just general construction. Again, if you have some of those skills, those are in high demand in the private sector, although they do not offer the same compensation study or the same compensation package, meaning you may not get insurance, you may not get pension, but they'll blow us out of the water on the hourly rate. So people are making those individual choices, and we are losing some of our staff or have a tough time attracting those type of workers right now.
So just jumping back into the lines here, some of the major increases you might notice in transportation, ice control materials. So most people remember last winter was pretty rough, and we went through all of our reserves. So we're kind of asking for a amount to this one-time purchase, restock our surplus so that we can be prepared for different events, and then also just our yearly allotment to fight this year's storm. Two other things in here that I wanted to touch on. Tree maintenance, and there's a typo in this one that's going to be corrected in the final document. So it's $151,000 for tree maintenance. Last year it was $125,000. We upped it. The year prior was $125,000. We upped it to $151,000 for the emerald ash borer treatment, which is something we do every 3 years. But we wanted to leave it at $151,000 because we historically always go over in this line item, tree maintenance. There's like 3,000 trees in the city that we maintain. We had an incident just today, and we've already completed our budget for this year. So every year it seems like we go over, so we'd like to leave it at $151,000. The other typo in here is street lights and signal repair. It should say, so there's $40,000 allotted there. There's no change to the budget number, but $15,000 inside that number will go to upgrading our traffic control cabinets on Armour. We partner with Operation Greenlight through the Mid-America Regional Council, and it's a great partnership. They, every year, will go after federal funds for cities to replace their traffic controllers, which is a very expensive piece of equipment, and that $15,000 represents 20% of the actual cost, so they pay for 80% of it, which is a great deal for us. So that's kind of included in that line. And then street sign replacement, that's actually jumped this year too. We've had some interesting incidents that have taken down a lot of signs, and just need to replenish that supply.
Did we budget for Hal getting run over 5,000 times this year?
We did not.
Okay. Budget amendment.
Budget amendment, yes. So if there's no other questions on transportation, I'll jump into water.
Okay. Quick thing on transportation. Just remind me, please, the KCATA bus service number that's in there, that is one that come October we'll know more and we may amend it at that point?
Correct. Again, kind of going back to the point in time document, we're being very conservative, meaning we're using the worst case numbers we can find to make sure that we are adequately prepared for the year ahead. So yes, KCATA is planning that, from what I have been told, still planning that transition, and we do intend to have them come forward and kind of talk about what their findings are now that is live, and possibly give us some recommendations moving forward. Just touching base on that one more time. We would like to get into the groove of a yearly contract as opposed to the 6-month contract. Just because for us, from a budgetary standpoint, it makes our ability to project and be able to fund a little bit more stabilized, as well as we do fear volatility in messaging, meaning if we were to take a hard shift somewhere mid-year, we do believe that our riders probably wouldn't appreciate that and would like a little bit more heads-up notice, hence the year.
It was only supposed to be one 6-month contract, like 7 contracts ago, right?
Yeah.
I wish you could see my smile.
Yeah. Perfect. Any questions for transportation? All right, 2 more.
Okay, moving on to water. This line is the water fund is an enterprise fund that supports the operations of the water distribution system, provides drinking water to the residents and businesses. One of the larger items you'll notice in here, no change to the budget this year, but chemicals. That's for the treatment plant to treat the water out of the aquifer that we send out through the distribution system. Another increase is for distribution maintenance. There's a lot of things under this item, valves, fire hydrants is kind of one that we're trying to attack this year. So that's kind of an increase there, and then just minor equipment repair. That's always something that's going up, so we're just kind of trying to keep up with it. It's kind of it's a very large fund, but kind of a smaller one, so if there's no questions on water, I'll go to WPC. That's on page 58, if you're following along on the book there. WPC, or Water Pollution Control, this is stormwater and sanitary sewer systems combined. One of the largest numbers you'll see in there is a $7.3 million. That's for sewer treatment for Kansas City. And then, again, just kind of some state regulatory fees that we pay to use our system. And then professional services is a line that we increased last year for the sewer rate and water rate study. We'd like to keep that at the same level and use that to focus on an I&I study in this coming year.
Councilmember Clevenger.
On the sewer, it looks like this year we're not going to get to where we budgeted, which is good. So we're not anticipating any sewer rate increase in Kansas City next year? Or if we do get an increase, the budget will be able to absorb that?
Yeah, that's built in. We are anticipating that KCMO will have an increase next year. That number can just fluctuate if you look back at the past couple of years. It's really focused on our large sewer users, and so last year there was a tremendous increase, specifically I believe with Ingredion. This year it's gone down a little bit, but revenue also our revenue also reflects that as well. So
the 7.3 has the rate increase already factored in then?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else on WPC? Seeing none, moving right along. Community development. Oh, were you done?
I was done, yes.
There we go. I was going to end it either. No. Community development, please.
Community development is the smallest department. We include planning, building, permitting, and inspections, and code enforcement services. We have no change in our budget this year from last year, so I'll try to be the shortest presentation as well.
Fantastic. Any questions? Community development. Seeing none, moving on. Economic development. Is that you two? Or no, that's
Nope,
back to
that's
Kim.
back over to me.
There we go.
We're trying to keep the ball bouncing, keep you guys engaged here as we kind of plow through some pretty heavy material. So economic development, just for you guys following along, it is on page 67. This is the line item that we track how we support economic development efforts within the city. This has the North Kansas City Business Council support in it. But really primarily what this fund is used for is legal expertise and financial expertise as we engage in our economic development efforts, specifically on large-scale developments or developments that have some form of incentive requests. That is really a very specialized skill set. And most cities, including Kansas City, outsource this because it is so very specific. So even, like I said, much larger cities with very, very large legal departments, they outsource their legal and financial services when they get these type of incentive requests as well. There really is no real change in this particular budget line item.
Councilmember Roberts.
So I have a handful of things here. First, on the North Kansas City Council, the Business Council's budget, I'd like to see a reduction on that. The budget that was provided to us earlier this month just showed some repetitive things, like a new website 2 years in a row, $12,000 for newsletters, some pretty high expenses. So I'd like to see that reduced by maybe $5,000. So it's not a huge reduction, but at the same time, I'd like to potentially see two different programs created. One of them being a storefront assistance for small businesses. It'd work like a small business marketing program. River North's done something similar. I think we can put out an RFQ for this, and maybe it's a business council thing, maybe it's River North or somebody else. But basically, the program would assist in small businesses that are customer facing, that are still dealing with the everyday problems of the pandemic. But running a small business is always a headache and something that you have to kind of learn and overcome. And I think that we could provide, a handful of small business grants, like $250 grants for marketing assistance in this program. And for that, I'm positioning 15,000 to start with on that. I don't anticipate that even being close to that being utilized, but part of that is going to be hiring, I think, somebody to run that program and pay somebody to adequately manage it. And then additionally, I'd like to create a small business incentive in here to bring new small businesses to our town. When we did the survey earlier this year, even though it wasn't greatly responded to, nearly every survey had something about new small businesses, particularly things of the arts and entertainment type. The only way to get that, create new small businesses, is with some kind of grant or incentive. When looking around the country, we see a lot of different types of incentives. I'm positioning a small one of $2,500 per new small business, and these would be customer-facing businesses. And that budget, I would like to see 15,000 put into that. And then finally, where that extra 5,000 from the Business Council I'd like to see go is I'd like to see us be a more active participant in Visit KC. I think that they already do a terrific job regionally bringing people to our area. And I think that putting $5,000 more towards a partnership with them makes a lot of sense. And that's it. That's a lot of things for everybody to think about. But I think we can do a whole lot more here in terms of helping our small businesses, attracting new small businesses, and advertising our entire community to the general public.
What were those line items one more time? I mean, just quickly. On so you had allocating 5 from the 30.
Yep, 5 from the 30, and then I'd be creating a new 30,000
Another
between
30,
two.
15 and 15.
Yep.
Okay. That's
And again,
another-
I think that's
okay.
just kind of a good starting point for these types of programs.
Okay. No, I just wanted to clarify the numbers there. I saw Councilmember Smith before.
Yeah, so thanks, Adam, for all that. I'm curious, in economic development and then convention and tourism, how those kind of cross over, because I know that we've used convention and tourism funds to support what River North is doing in the customer-facing side of things. So could some of those funds come from convention and tourism? Because I know those are very specifically dog-eared for certain things. How could that work out?
So convention and tourism has a lot more flexibility in what we can do legally with the money.
Okay.
And we actually have a Visit KC partnership, and it's funded. I'm pivoting now over to page 88. So on page 88, we do have Visit KC membership. If you look at that particular fund, it says memberships, and that is what that is. So we are at the bottom dollar amount of, it's $1,500 as a membership. So my preference, I think, would be to fund some of what you're requesting out of that particular fund. I do have some legality questions I would need to run down on the business grant. I think on the marketing standpoint, that's something that we already fund out of the Convention and Tourism Fund, because in the Missouri State, and I hate to go state legislature and quoting that, but it does allow for those type of funds for marketing efforts to bring more people. And the thought process is you actively market to people to come to your city and enjoy your businesses and then stay at the hotel of which funds that particular fund, if that makes sense. It's kind of cyclical a little bit, and that's actually one of the reasons why the River North and the City Tourism Fund is out of that particular fund, because I'm allowed to do so with those funds, because they actually kind of, one helps beef up the other, if it were. So just to make sure that I'm scribing correctly, so it would be, and again, the Business Council will be here at your September 7th meeting, where they will present you guys did get a packet in your last City Council meeting. It's just an attachment. They will actually be here in person to present all the services that they have provided for their $30,000 services contract, which will be expiring at the end of this month. And then one of the things that they will ask is for that contract to be renewed. So if I could wait to adjust the budget until after the City Council has had that discussion. Sure. And again, Mr. Roberts, you are more than welcome to amend that particular item at that City Council meeting. And then I will take whatever number that is and add it into the budget.
Thank you. To follow up on that, it looks like, I'm not sure if this is a data error or it's zeros in fiscal year 19 and 20 on these. Was the Business Council support and the legal services coming out of a different fund in prior years?
We separated, yeah, it was coming from a different account within the economic development group, but we decided, I believe in this current fiscal year, to separate those out as separate line items. So,
okay.
Yes, prior years would show zero.
And do we track additionally, as far as business council support? I know the 30,000 is part of that contract for services. How much we spend on the luncheons and how much we contribute in kind of an indirect way?
So we can pull that. We don't track that as a line item. That's actually back in the administration.
Okay.
So we pay for those lunches. And the reason why we do that is we don't anticipate what lunches the governing body or staff would like to participate in as part of their education or support. So we don't line item, meaning like, you know, there's this amount in North Kansas City Business Council lunches, and then this much in KCATA, or if there was any other luncheon that a governing body or staff members, a lot of us staff members belong to professional organizations, and we go to those style of lunches as well. So we don't, I hate to say, we try to give some flexibility, but as Nick kind of mentioned, we also want to try to capture and show specific items in the budget where we can, so that city councils have an understanding and the community has an understanding of where the finances go.
Thank you.
Is that it? Councilmember Seaver, then Clevenger.
Yeah. In regard to actually providing some grants or anything else like that to small businesses, I have no problem with that, as long as those small businesses are actually paying a living wage to their employees. And I would like that to be a condition for that.
So, and I hate to bring up one of the other topics, but those could be styles of conversation that we get into, small business grants specifically, because it is allowed in the ARPA funds. So we show that within the city's budget. Again, those funds are not programmed. We quite literally just got those funds, so we do anticipate bringing that topic forward for a work session later, so that the city council can kind of have some conversation and provide direction on how you would like those funds spent. But those particular funds do come with a different set of rules. Some of them are looser, some of those are tighter, just like any great federal funding program. So that could be an opportunity as well.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Way to steal my thunder, Kim. Thanks. No. Yeah, I was going to say that about the ARPA funds and the COVID, because that's how we were able to do it legally the last time. But before, we were advised that we couldn't do it until we were told we could. But I'm all in favor of, like what Tony and Adam said, as far as helping our small businesses, incentivizing them in any way we can. I would, when the business council comes, I do have several questions about their website as well. So if they could kind of focus on that and tell us kind of what they do and why they're having a repetitive request in there unless the funds were encumbered. I do think they play an important role, especially for maybe we have River North for some of our entertainment. The business council has been good about, the manufacturing sector and other, forms of, the landowners. So I know they do a lot of newsletters and the directory and put on the luncheons, but always looking forward to talking about what they do. So thank you.
Councilmember Roberts.
I would just like to clarify, both those programs I would like to see being ongoing and not a one-time program. So the COVID funds is why I didn't suggest it. I think there's different things we can do with that.
Perfect. Thank you. Any further comments on this section? All right.
So I'm going
on
to
to
kind
the
of
next.
bleed into a little bit of clarification only for my own sloppy notes here. So you would like to see a small business grant marketing style program? And what was the dollar amount on that one?
They're both 15,000. And I think that's a good kind of small amount that we can gauge the interest of these programs.
Would that be in addition to the city sponsor tourism program?
Yes. So this would be different. So my thought with this would, rather than being like because that's more event-based, this could be general marketing. So for example, somebody that might not have a robust social media, like let's just say Pat's Pub, for example, maybe they need additional assistance right now during these slower days, and we could provide them with somebody who could take photos for them and actually run a social campaign. So part of that $15,000 budget would be having that person on like a on-call basis. So when they put a request in, that they can come run a social program for that month, and we would supply them with like a $250 campaign. And then the other one would be a new small business incentive for customer-facing businesses.
That one I may need to sharpen my pencil and try to figure out. I understand there where you're trying to go.
Yep.
So I'm unsure where to show it in the budget just yet, but give me a little bit to figure it out.
Interdepartmental, sorry. I was waiting on Kim again. Back to Nick.
Okay, so next is interdepartmental, which is on page 69, the printed version. This is in the general fund and includes programs and services that are not provided by one specific department. So that includes utility payments, electricity, gas for the general fund departments. It also includes a lot of our major software maintenance agreements, including our ERP platform. And in fiscal year 2022, it includes 3 new programs. One is a $50,000 transfer for the North Kansas City Healthy Citizens Initiative that was discussed in a work session in July with the YMCA. So that would be a $50,000 transfer to the Community Center Fund, which would then go to the Y for that program. It also includes the minor home repair and modification contracts. And another area that was built into this budget was diversity training, which we have right now budgeted at $80,000. That's our initial kind of best guess for what that training program would cost for this citywide training.
Thank you, Councilmember Roberts.
So this is, I think, the best place for me to talk about this, but because of the general liability insurance sees such an increase from 2019 to 2022, I mean, a pretty shocking amount of increase. I think it'd be a good time for us to put an RFQ out for all of our general liabilities. When I went through just about every one of these, it looks like there's an increase in almost every department, as well as pretty massive increases in work comp policies, in particular the fire departments. So if possible, I'd like us to explore maybe a different insurance carrier.
Sure. And we.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in here. So the increase, just kind of overall, the line items is around 10%. The city does engage an insurance broker to help us navigate, just like what we do when for health insurance, we do engage with the broker. Municipalities, there are very few that like to insure us. And the reason being is people like to litigate us. Typically speaking, our employees run toward the danger and not away from the danger. And specifically cities with police forces are starting to see significant increases. We are 3 years into our current liability insurance, and we will be going to market. So the city's current insurance broker will be taking us to market within this next fiscal year. So we do currently have Travelers. From what we have been told by our broker, and again, they are the person that we partner with to understand we are actually on the lower end of liability insurance currently for municipalities. And again, a lot of that is market demand. COVID is playing a mix into that, especially with the workman's comp particular areas. But again, municipalities, we are a totally unique beast. And again, a lot of that really is just the nature of who and what we are. People play on our playscapes, they fall, they litigate. Anthony kind of talked about a few things. People hit our stuff with their vehicles and they don't have insurance, and those items need to be fixed. We have had several big ticket items over the last couple of years, which is also influencing into here. Those of you on council may remember when a truck ran into one of our stormwater pump buildings. That was not insured. So our city's liability insurance paid for that, and I want to say, Crystal, it was just shy of $1 million, if I believe. So unfortunately, that is definitely what drives those insurance carrier costs. Again, uninsured motorists hitting things, light poles, pumping station buildings. Those are items that we cannot live without, we cannot have. And unfortunately, we've had a multitude of those over the last couple of years, which drives up our cost.
Yeah, I just thought the $54,000 increase from 3 years is quite a bit, but I guess if we're spending millions on a lot of accidents recently, but it'll be nice to see what happens, I guess, next year when we get moved on for bid.
We are looking forward to some relief in that particular area.
Councilmember Clevenger.
First of all, I wasn't driving the truck that hit the pump station. Question on the diversity and equity and inclusion training with $80,000. Says citywide, like who would be trained on that is one of my questions, and then I got a few others after that.
So we actually got that number from one of our sister communities here in the metro who's recently undergone training all of their boards. The training is available to all their boards and commissions, as well as it is mandated for city staff. So that is who we are looking towards. Some of the desires, especially with the Equity and Inclusion Committee, was to have that style of training available to all boards and commissions, as well as all city employees. So that is where that particular number is. I will say that equity and inclusion training is a hot commodity right now. So we are competing along with every other municipality in the United States for a limited number of vendors.
And do we have any money going to the EIC, the Equity and Inclusion Committee, for their next fiscal year of their?
We do, sir. We are reflecting $10,000 for their use in the next fiscal year.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Smith.
On the topic of that training, I forget exactly what we landed on during the work session, but I seem to remember like a web-based training. Is that correct?
So that is some of the stuff that we are trying to find a vendor that has some of the flexibility that is needed for boards and commissions, as well as some of the variables that we can command here at the staff level. Meaning at the staff level, I can move schedules around. Boards and commissions are a little bit trickier. So what we are looking at is a hybrid model. And some of that is some of the information that we are learning from. So the unified government is the one who's actually going through this. They are a very, very large organization with multiple boards, and I believe they're at 2,000 employees. So what they are learning, we all are getting a better understanding of how maybe some best practices and maybe some lessons learned from them. One of the things that they are encountering is that there isn't a base of understanding, meaning that before advanced training can occur, you have to build a common base of understanding. So that is the process that they have learned, and that was some of the lessons learned they're passing on, is to have some web-based videos or some web-based training to create a common base of understanding and then start to get into that active growth and learning.
So would the 80,000 be more for like a content library style of training to build that base and then move on to?
It would be a hybrid model. So it would be, some of it would be in-person training, some of it would be almost on demand.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions on this section? Seeing none. Councilmember Palumbi.
I would like to ask for a formal 5-minute recess.
All right, seeing no objection, we'll take a 5-minute recess, coming back at 7:38.
No, I would never. Yeah, well, I think for us, we're so short-staffed, I think we were scared to lose more. He was tanking this
We are at
weekend.
7:38, 7:38. I know, that's why I turned off all the mics on there. That's why I turned off all the mics for a second. Uh-oh.
Had to make dinner for a toddler.
Oh, we're missing one here. Missing one. Anybody see which direction he went? Zach, are you in the building? All right, he can ask a question now.
I take direction from you, Mayor.
Please proceed. Let's go.
Okay. I am going to revisit conventions and tourism, even though we chatted about it a little bit earlier, just so I can field any more questions or any more input into this particular fund. So this is funded by a 5% hotel motel tax, and again, this is the fund out of all of the funds within the city has been impacted most by COVID. This is where our Visit KC membership is currently funded at. It is funded at the $1,500 level. So if there was input from staff about adjusting that, can you give me some direction?
You said this was our Visit KC?
This is.
Definitely. I mean, that's something I know I've voiced my opinion on before. You know, they already have the infrastructure set up for this. They have the wherewithal. They have the people. So whatever. Well, you had an amount? You had an extra 5,000 or what?
Yeah, I can't remember the pricing, how it breaks down on there. That's not the top level, is what I remember. That's like the bottom for, yep. I'd like to see us explore being a more active member. That's like the bare minimum, if I remember, being listed on a couple things. But I think we can be a more active participant and get businesses listed in their books, for example. Yeah.
Do you have some idea of what that?
I will shortly.
Okay. There we go.
It's something that I can look into, definitely, and bring forward some options for the city council to explore.
Thank you.
Another program that is funded out of that particular one, we actually have two different programs that the city council adopted a couple years ago, and one of them is the River North support via the Second Saturdays program. That is $3,000. It is paid for in two different chunks, as it were, every 6 months. The River North team gets that particular money only because they're the steward of the Second Saturday program. So they get two $1,500 payments. Those come in front of the city council for approval, as well as we have the city-sponsored tourism grant program that is currently funded as $5,000. And businesses are able to utilize that for a specific event. There is a bit of a multiplier effect, meaning that if several businesses come together, each one of them get $500 for the same event. Really, that was to spark collaboration and to make it even a bigger, better event. So that is what in here. There is some capital that we will get to in the next budget cycle, but if you guys have any questions, concerns, or directions, please let me know.
Councilmember Smith.
So I heard 5,000 and 3,000 in those two. I see 10,000 in advertising. Is there another two that's unaccounted for? I'm assuming that's where those came out of, advertising.
We can get a further breakdown of what all is included in this. I know there are a couple other items that I'm drawing a blank on right now, but we have a detailed list of what all goes
Okay.
into
The advertising, just so for clarification on that particular line items, when the city advertises that North Kansas City is a great place to stay, play, and eat, that's where those funds come from. So there are several different, because tourism just in general has gone down, Some of those trade publications have actually folded over this last year. So some of the places that we used to advertise, unfortunately, no longer exist.
Okay. Did we actually spend negative $1 in 2020, out of curiosity?
I'm going to ask Nick how we did that.
I could provide the detail, but I was looking at that and thinking, what
I just
could that
circled
be? It could be a reimbursement of maybe a prior year.
Okay. It was just an outlier, so I had to circle it.
Negative expenditure.
Yeah.
We need more of those. Next item.
So the next items, I'm going to do the next two, which is the Northgate and One North. So Northgate Village is page 150 in your binder. So unfortunately, it does not have a tab, but it is 150 in your binder. The next two items are actually project specific. They both have a TIF district associated with them. Northgate Village is an item that you guys have heard multiple times before. It is a very, very long-range program with the city that began back in 1999. Because it's actually extremely unique when it comes to TIF districts because it actually reimburses the city. Generally speaking, TIF districts are a partnership with the developer, and the TIF monies are collected and then remitted, very much like the One North one. But Northgate Village actually benefits the city. The city spent money out of its gaming fund for capital investment, for property acquisition, and to put in all the infrastructure for that particular project. And the TIF is to reimburse the gaming fund. So some of the things that you guys kind of have heard Nick and I talk about is long-term financial planning, specifically for the gaming fund. The Northgate TIF parcels begin to come off of the TIF register and go back onto the register in year 2027. So the money that right now is collected into the Northgate TIF fund, and then it goes back into gaming, those revenues will begin to decrease and hence reduce gaming fund as well. So this particular item, you will see pretty much the only expenditures out of there are legal. We do have two developments that we do anticipate moving forward. One of them has already been executed. That's the 23rd Street apartment complex that is probably going to begin mobilizing here in late fall. That was one of the projects, one of the last undeveloped projects for Northgate Village. And we do anticipate some activity beginning on the commercial property in the coming months. So once those two projects are under development and we have a better understanding of the financial applications of those two developments, we do anticipate bringing forward a TIF plan readjustment. The TIF plan has been recalculated a few times, but it needs to be recalculated again with the new developments in line. We do anticipate that being the last time that that particular TIF plan is recalculated, and then we will have a better understanding of the long-term gaming fund implications once that plan is calculated.
Councilmember Smith.
So in the summary comment, it mentions that 1.3 million is a 29% increase over the prior year, but the prior year looks like 1.3 million and some change. Is that an actual increase, or is it static year over year?
That's a budgeted increase. So the 2021 budget, we basically kind of, when we put together this budget, we looked at what the prior year was. So for 2021, we had a fairly conservative $987,000 estimate. We actually collected about 1.3. So
okay, so we're just projecting it to stay at what it was.
Yes.
Okay, actual versus.
Correct. Within also the fiscal year 2021 and 2022, there was a new building constructed in that area as part of the city view. If you remember, a new building was on there, so we do anticipate some monetary changes. But right now, we don't have an understanding, which is why you see the proposed budget numbers where they are.
Sure.
All right. Next.
And I'll pivot now over to One North, page 154. The City Council actually just created this fund not all that long ago, and this is more of your traditional TIF style district where the monies that are remitted or collected through the TIF are given back to the developer for development fees. This particular fund right now, as you can see, it's really more of a pass-through account, and that's what we anticipate using this for. This really does, though, meet the best practice when we spoke to our auditor of how to reflect these funds, since these funds are remitted to the city and then we reimburse them. So for clarity and to make sure that we are doing our financial reporting in the best place possible, that's what this particular fund is for. So I am going to hand this over to Nick for Health Reserve.
But jumping back a few pages to page 96, if you're following along in the printed version, we have the Health Reserve Fund. This was created in 2011 as part of a retirement resignation incentive to subsidize health premiums for retirees for a period of 5 years. This actually expired in this fiscal year, with the last eligible employee turning 65. So the budget for next year is just covering transfer back to the gaming fund equal to the fund balance. So that is the major change for this year. It will still show up in the budget for the next couple of years because of actuals, but we will not be budgeting anything else for this fund going forward. Okay. Next is the Communications Fund on page 93. This is, I also think of it as the KC Fiber Fund. It is operated by a third party, No6. The city splits operating revenues and deficits 50-50, so if there's a deficit, which there's been the last few years, the city covers half of that. It's been averaging a little under $10,000 annually for the last couple of years. In addition, the city will also subsidize certain capital expenditures. So we've had a few of those, ASB bridge repair, and a couple other major fiber repairs in the city. And any deficit is generally covered by the gaming fund. So it's all the revenue is operated by our third-party vendor. So if there's anything that the city has to cover, we cover that through the gaming fund.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Question on this, on the well, I'm not sure if this is covered under capital outlay, but do we anticipate with this fund, any other technology updates? I know that our fiber optic, and we came into the agreement in 2014 with KC Fiber. Do we anticipate any other things like with fiber huts or the fiber itself, or anything that we're going to have to do before we renegotiate the agreement?
So that would be something we would rely on them. Again, since they are the manager of that particular asset, we really don't understand some of the day-to-day operations because that is what they handle. So those are some of the questions as we begin to kind of get our heads around the fact that that contract is going to be ending. We do anticipate some form of capital need within that network. We have not done a whole system overview. Again, we are not, at least here at the staff level, we're not fiber optic specialists. We don't understand the grid or any needs that might, from a capital standpoint,
So it's up to them to
be done.
up to them to bring those to our attention then.
Correct.
Okay.
Then I'll get to Councilmember Smith. It may be worth our time at some point to consider some sort of technology audit to see what exactly is going on with the assets. Because they're all our assets, correct? They're just managing it. And we haven't probably seen that since September 2014. So it may be good so we can get some idea, what it is we may be taking over at some point. I don't know what that costs. There. Consultant. We'll get a consultant on that. Councilmember Smith.
So if I'm understanding correctly, our operating assistance is capped at 150,000. What happened in 19 and 20?
Oh, I can talk about this one because I was here.
Okay. Yeah. So a couple different things. You'll see this in the community center too. These are, Kim probably has something more specific, but we also, this is where we place their actual operating revenues and expenditures. So we don't budget for that, but when we reconcile at the end of the year with our audit, we do have to basically account for what their actual operating revenue and expenditures is, and this is the line item where we put that. But we haven't traditionally budgeted for that. It's more of an audit function, but it does show up as.
So that's not money that we're spending, that's money that that Knox is
Yes.
spending?
Yes, and there's a corresponding revenue under operating revenue.
Okay.
Rick, also in 19 and 20 specifically was the vandalism that had happened to the fiber network. That was, at the time, we did not understand that the fiber network was not underneath the city's insurance, and it still actually is not within the city's insurance. And the reason being is when you did a long-term budget analysis of that, we were actually money ahead. I hate to say it to risk, insurance is risk management. So when that particular vandalism happened, because we owned it, we were responsible to repair it. And it was a very costly event.
Further questions on this fund? Nope.
The last department fund that I'm going to talk about is the Community Center Fund, which is on page 90 of the printed version. This, similar to the Communications Fund, it's operated by a third party, in this case, the YMCA. Also a 50-50 split of deficit or surplus, which the last few years there's actually been a surplus. So you'll see a negative line item number there under the YMCA operating subsidy that reflects the surpluses that we've had the last couple of years in this fund. But we also pay an administrative fee. So if that deficit is under $200,000, the administrative fee equals 17% of operating revenue. So for the 2022 budget, basing that off of fiscal year 2019, which we anticipate somewhat of a back to normal operations for the YMCA. And so when just considering the budget for this, we went back to fiscal year 2019 as our base year. Really, again, similar to the communication fund, because there is no other revenue stream other than the operating revenue that the community center has. Any subsidies would be coming from the gaming fund for the community center. This also does include, as I mentioned, an interdepartmental $50,000 transfer for the NKC Healthy Citizens Initiative. That's, from a fund perspective, that's basically a wash. So we get that money from the general fund provided to the community center.
Councilmember Smith.
So this is, I've still struggled to understand our full operating agreement with the YMCA on this. But if I'm reading the budget correctly, we're budgeting for simultaneously a $200,000 loss and revenue of $2.78 million, which would result in that fee. So are we budgeting for an impossible scenario?
Yeah,
we wouldn't say impossible, but again, we have to budget for the worst case scenario.
Okay. And when is this arrangement, when was the last time we approved it?
So this is a 10-year agreement.
2015.
Okay, so that predates everybody but Zach. Is that right? Okay. I would like to dig a little bit into the details of this because it just seems like such a strange arrangement to pay out on revenue, not on net income, while also sharing in losses. And then again, going back to that work session, the Healthy Citizens Initiative, did we ever actually land on a plan? Did we pick something, or are we just throwing a $50,000 number in here?
So from a budget perspective, I had to plug in something.
Okay.
Which is that $50,000. The right now, I'm working with Tina to bring forward kind of some of those finer details for the city council to consider, not at the 7th, but at the 21st.
Okay. And I certainly appreciate Tina and the work they do, but this arrangement just feels so strange. And then if I remember correctly, we looked at a number of different plans, and for that $50,000 number that we plugged in, we had a number of different plans, and all of them had the YMCA contributing like very little to the bottom line, with us sharing in losses and funding if they have a surplus. So I'd like to, I don't want to ask for extra meetings, but I would like to have another work session to discuss that arrangement and what that means in the grand scheme of things. So put it on the docket, please.
I think overall on the agreement, their goal is to have basically no exposure here. I mean, we brought them in to manage the agreement, to manage our asset.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's the general genesis of a lot of
Correct,
that.
yeah, and I was not here as well either,
Yeah.
but from what I have been able to glean off of past reports, the city was at a negative $1.5 million when they brought in the YMCA to help mitigate their losses.
Right.
And I believe 2024 is when it would potentially be in those conversations again. Councilmember Clevenger, the senior Councilmember Clevenger.
Well, if you want some history on this, I've been through that now. Granted, I was pretty green on the council because I was in April of 2014. But from coming to council meetings in the past, yeah, the community center was like 1.3, 1.5 million in the deficit. At the time, I don't remember a lot of good options for it, as far as either purchasing or using it. Now, granted, some of the issues are, they do have a pretty sweet deal. And that's something that, we need to look at when we are going to be negotiating it again, what we do in the future. But, I mean, certainly they've come a long way and we've done a lot better. I think, I don't understand all of the numbers as far as the budgeting, but I think they're going for the worst case scenario where the deficit is less than 200,000. They get, the higher management fee plus based off the gross earnings. But the one thing on the community initiative is, certainly I'd like to see something like that to help our residents come through. Again, to be able to get to the YMCA and to be able to utilize that service at a reduced rate. But it's something that we do need to look at as far as the YMCA. I think it was $2 and some change that they were putting in. And, I think we were going to explore with staff and the YMCA if that number was going to go up somewhat, so.
I can relate, it has gone up.
Okay, good. But, back in the day, it was not a good situation to be in. Kind of Link City was the same. One thing I do want to clarify is we don't share in the losses. We fund the losses completely on the YMCA if there's a deficit, correct?
Correct.
Right. And I thought I heard somebody say that we share in the losses, but we do not. But we do for share in the surplus if there isn't. So, thanks.
Councilmember Plumby.
I just kind of want to add to that as well. So I don't know with Tina if we can have this kind of at the next work session or in your conversations with her, but I know we just have that 50 as kind of a placeholder. But if for some reason we don't use that entire 50, can we have some kind of clause that says that that comes back to us as opposed to something they keep if it's not used?
So they actually will invoice us every month. So it's not like the city cuts them a check for $50K. They actually will invoice us for the use, because, just so you guys kind of understand, we are actually mandated to, in our budget, reflect the full dollar amount of any agreement. So it is the worst case scenario. And that is actually mandated by state statute. As the city enters into an agreement, if there's a top dollar amount, we have to include that worst case scenario, even if we don't think we're ever going to get there. That agreement won't have a top dollar amount, but for budget purposes, I had to plug in some form of number, and that seemed to be Tina's, at the time, worst case scenario with the funding metrics that she presented. So again, when you're going through and you're actually assembling a city budget, there are some requirements that we are required to, and that goes for employee staff as well. We have to show within the budget every penny as if everybody authorized works every single day. And even from a healthcare standpoint, we try to, and this is where you get into a little bit of, I wouldn't say magic math, but you do try to figure out, okay, when you look at your workforce and you kind of understand what those components look like, what if everybody took family, which is the most expensive option, and make sure that I've got the money in the budget to pay for that person's individual choice. Now, of course, the employer pays for some as well, but in order for our budget to actually meet the muster from the state statutes, it's the worst case scenario every time.
Magic math sounds like we have some Enron things going on around here. Yeah, okay.
No, I tried to think of a different way to say that, which one sounds
we might
so
want to come up
shady.
with a different one for that one. They don't have any more deficit reduction bonuses, right? They've exhausted all of that, correct?
Correct.
Perfect, thank you. Any further questions on community center? Nope. Next one. Is that it?
That
Is that
actually
it?
concludes our presentation.
All
Does the
right.
city council have any other questions for staff?
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, sorry, I got so many questions tonight. There's one persistent line item through each of these is phones and pagers. And are we still doing pagers? Is that?
I should update the pages.
I'd like a pager if we are. And then, is that just funding, are we subsidizing personal cell phones? Are we buying cell phones for, like, how does that stack out?
So that line item actually captures quite a bit of data, and I'm trying to be a punny here. But, so the mobile data, that funds things of hard assets, meaning like the city's video surveillance cameras. They actually have a Wi-Fi card in them. That is how we get those signals to be able to keep eyes on those. Laptops and vehicles, you guys may have seen some of our officers have laptops, and some of our public works employees have laptops. That's the card, that's the air card that allows them to get the signal so that they can remote into whatever service that they are needing. We do have city-issued phones. A lot of that is, most of those are employees that are field-based, meaning they're officers. They don't have a desk phone. They live in their car, or they're out in the field. They don't have a desk phone that I can give them to be able to get a hold of them. A lot of them are municipal employees, municipal works employees, and they're used pretty much daily, especially on a day like today where we kind of had a pop-up storm, and all of a sudden we're getting lots of calls about down limbs. That's how we're getting in touch with those particular employees. We also have just like a handful of, they're not flip phones, but boy, they're not off from it. And those are assignment phones, meaning that if you are in charge of this particular, like the water treatment plant actually has one. And it's an assignment phone, meaning that it's your job to do this for the week, so you get that phone for the week. So those are assets that actually kind of go on the shift with the person wearing the hat at this time. So that's what that's what that line item funds.
Okay. And then final thing out of me, I spent almost a decade auditing budgets. That's why I've got so many questions, I guess. There's a lot of kind of nebulous account titles. I think they're just kind of catch-alls for a higher level, like, admin fees, other services, other this. I assume we have subledgers for those if we wanted to take a look, or how do those get handled?
Some of them we do. The other services, it may be, we would have specific contracts in place. It depends on the function. But a lot of that, we would cover through the significant budgetary items, the narrative. Most of that is covered through there. We can go back and look and see if there's anything that's not spelled out, but it's different by department and division on what might go into that.
Sure. And one of the things that, using banks as an example, whenever a new CFO would come in, you'd usually see those other accounts like taper off and then get itemized into something else, because over time they tend to grow as they're allowed to. I would just be curious to see if there are other more succinct ways we can slot those in future budgets. Now, that's an ask for next year, but just something to keep an eye on over the course of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. We can go back and, like you said, audit some of those functions. And I think we've done a few of those in the last couple of years as we've prepared the budgets. As we look through something and might not know what it was because someone developed it 10 years ago.
Right.
So anytime we have that opportunity, we look to do that.
Good. And I appreciate that you've got your eyes on the ball. Very capable hands. Thank you.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Just congratulations on an efficient budget meeting. I've been through some long ones. We used to do them both, the capital and the operating in one sitting in 4 hours. Was pretty long, so I'm glad we're breaking it up. I like the new online format. Some of the font threw me as far as the different, like, boldness, and then some of the font that's not real bold. I mean, it's kind of light, so I don't know if that's, like, compliant with, what do they call that, the 503 or 585 or something like that. But, I mean, I know this is the first year, so just take that in mind in the next year. So.
All right. So I was just going to remind council that this is the penciled budget. So you have ideas, see things removed, see things added. Definitely be ready to discuss that at the next meeting at the tail end of talking about our capital expenditures, so we can try to get as close to the final budget as possible. So we're not trying to do it at that council meeting the same night we're trying to approve it.
So just,
Kim looks like she has something to say there.
we do. So we do love our new budget platform. One of the things that Nick and I were kind of talking about here is we do believe, don't hold us to this, we do believe that there is a way to actually add another column to what you're seeing online. and some of the feedback that we have gotten from this particular budget to actually add that to the online platform. So that way you guys can see a little bit more of an in-process document versus coming in later and perhaps getting another tome of printed document at your next meeting. One of the things that we really, obviously Nick and I are a little bit of budget nerds here. We are excited by being able to make this more of a flexible and fluid tool. We kind of had chatted about this earlier, that as the year progresses and as the budget gets amended, again, it's not supposed to be something you throw on a shelf. It's supposed to move and groove with you as your needs change, to be able to have that entered as soon as the budget is amended. And then the live version is always the most current version. It's helpful for you as policymakers, so you can kind of see where the money is going and being able to communicate to your constituents where that money is going. It's helpful to the staff to understand what money we have for operations. So we are very, very excited for this tool because we really think it's kind of going to be fundamental in how we do our budgeting, the changes that we can do, not only during this process, but as the year progresses.
Perfect. So that's it for budget. I'm just going to remind everyone real quick, we are going to have two motions to go into an executive session, closed session. The live stream will cut off during that. And I just want to remind everyone there'll be no further public votes, no further discussion on any other items except adjournment. Number 3, who's making my motion?
So
You want
moved.
me to read it?
Oh, you do have to read that. Thank you, Crystal.
Consideration of a request to hold and recess into an executive session as requested by the interim city administrator to be held on this date on a personnel matter pursuant to Missouri Revised Statute Section 610.0213.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Palumbi.
Yes.
Councilmember Graves.
Yes.
Councilmember Saper.
Yes.
Councilmember Toll.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Consideration of a request to hold and recess into an executive session as requested by the interim city administrator be held on this date on a litigation matter pursuant to Missouri Revised Statute Section 610.0211.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Palumbi.
Yes.
Councilmember Graves.
Yes.
Councilmember Saper.
Yes.
Councilmember Toll.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Executive session.